Do the trashy pulp novels of the world have anything to offer? Are bestsellers all they're cracked up to be? Here at Terrible Book Club, we explore whether you really can judge a book by its cover, or its ridiculous synopsis. You ever passed a book and thought, ugh, who's reading this? We probably are.
Hello and welcome to episode 199 of the Terrible Book Club. I'm Paris, and this is Chris.
Hello!
This time, we read Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. This was requested by our patron Austin, who said, I'm gonna have to go with Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. A cozy and wholesome story about overcoming your past and settling down to side with the mob threatening to burn down your establishment. This book was a bit of a thing on BookTok, from our understanding. Usually that's a sign of something containing, like, fucking balloon shifter sex or whatever, but this actually seems to be for the less horny crowd, for once.
Thank God. Thank Tereblo.
Hail Tereblo. Alright, if this is your first time listening to the show, what we do here at the Terrible Book Club is read books that we assume will be bad based on their cover, title, summary, or some combination of the three. Sometimes, like today, we read books that our patrons, listeners, or friends recommend. So, we typically do the opposite of what most people do when they are in a bookstore or while they're browsing the internet looking for something to read. And usually, this experiment results in a hilariously disappointing read, but once in a while, we do actually end up liking or even loving the book. For today, in addition to our usual barnyard language, just got a lot of baked goods talk. You're gonna be hungry. You're gonna think about how you could really go for one of those right now, and you're gonna want coffee or tea. You're gonna want like a croissant, a apple turnover. You're gonna want any manner of layered, folded, buttered things. So, if you are hungry, I would say get that taken care of.
This is a bad episode to listen to.
Let me tell you, I made that mistake, and I had to read this. Two of the times I was reading this, I was craving a snack. It was rough. So get your hungers settled. Feed the beast before you head in. All right. I suppose am I reading both of the summaries today, Chris, or do you want to do the back of the book?
No, I can do the back of the book one. Right. I'll do the back of the book and the characters and setting, and you can do our summary later on.
All right. So Chris is going to read you the back of the book summary. This is sort of the, what's literally printed on the back of the book, or, displayed as the summary when you are looking to purchase something to try to pull you in. So Chris, what does Legends and Lattes promise? Tell us.
After a lifetime of bounties and bloodshed, Viv is hanging up her sword for the last time. The battle-weary orc aims to start fresh, opening the first ever coffee shop in the city of Thune. But old and new rivals stand in the way of success, not to mention the fact that no one has the faintest idea what coffee actually is. If Viv wants to put the blade behind her and make her plans a reality, she won't be able to go it alone. But the true rewards of the uncharted path are the travelers you meet along the way, and whether drawn together by ancient magic, flaky pastry, or a freshly brewed cup, they may become partners, family, and something deeper than she ever could have dreamed. Alright, for our characters and setting, we have Viv, the orc swordwoman and mercenary who is the protagonist for this adventure. Cal, the general contractor, who's helping her build the shop. Tandri, the succubus, who becomes sort of like barista / marketer. Thimble, the ratkin baker, the greatest character ever.
Would you say that Thimble is perhaps Mr. Rat for today's purposes?
If that turned out to be what Mr. Rat was doing all along, I wouldn't be surprised. We have Viv's former adventuring party, most notably Fennis, who has beef with her. The Madrigal, local crime lady. Coffee shop regulars, including Hemington the mage and a weird gnome that seems to have time powers. Also, there's Pendry, who's like a bard kind of guy that shows up sometimes.
Yep.
And finally, Amity the dire cat.
All right, so since you probably have not read this, we like to provide a basic plot summary just so you understand all the, general movements of the story and kind of sort of what happens, right, without having to actually read this whole thing, so that when we are screaming and yelling about what we hate, you'll know what we're talking about for the most part. All right, Chris wrote our summary today. Thank you, Chris. So I'm going to go ahead and read that. Viv has been fighting her whole life. She's tired. So tired that she could really use a cup of coffee. That wonderful gnomish delicacy that she tried on one of her adventures. In fact, she likes it so much that she takes her adventuring fortune and a supposedly magical good luck charm known as the Squirrel stone, harvested from the forehead of a horrible monster, and starts up her own coffee shop in the city of Thune as her retirement plan. She finds Cal, a contractor, by just kind of scoping out who's doing work at the dock. Cal takes a liking to her ideas, and once he sees the dilapidated livery Viv bought, comes up with a plan to turn it into a proper Dunkin Orcnuts. Or
Thune runs on Orcnuts.
Oh, wow, okay. No, I'm never going to see a butternut donut and think of anything except for Orcnut donut, so thank you. That's been ruined. Actually, they call it Legends and Lattes, which is kind of a strange choice considering no one really knows what the hell a latte is in Thune or really what Viv was up to. Viv hires Tandri, a succubus with some business sense, and eventually Thimble, a ratkin baker, who are both lured in by this gnomish delicacy of coffee. Tandri joins as a fellow barista and also does some marketing and art, and Thimble shows Viv that he can make delicious baked goods like cinnamon rolls and biscotti, so he's hired on as the official baker, which brings in more customers. Thimble's treats, Tandri's marketing skills, and Viv's coffee are all a hit when combined. The shop starts seeing regular customers and booming business. However, life isn't all two creams, two sugars. Viv and the gang are soon accosted by goons of the Madrigal, a local crime boss who wants their cut of Viv's business. Viv resists despite constant threats from the Madrigal's underlings that ill will befall her if she refuses to pay up. Meanwhile, Viv's former mercenary co-worker Fennis knows she has the Squirrel stone and wants it for himself, since legend surrounding it claims it brings good fortune on the holder. He stops by the shop to menace Viv a bit, but is scared off by Amity, a dire cat that hangs out in the store. With all those jerks skulking about, Viv decides it's a good idea to get some magical help with the place, so she asks a shop regular, Hemington, a local magic student, and person who just hangs around without buying much, to install an alarm for Fennis's presence. She and the Madrigal eventually meet and agree that instead of paying a regular bribe like everybody else does for protection, Viv will instead provide her with a regular bag of Thimble's baked treats and free coffee for her crew, instead of direct cash payments, which is really the way to go when it comes to paying the local crime boss. It's a good thing that Viv got that alarm spell cast, though, because it wakes Viv up the first time Fennis tries to come for the stone. Once again, the dire cat runs him off. Viv starts getting extra paranoid, and Tandri insists on staying with her at the store at night. Viv's paranoia is vindicated when they both wake up to the entire shop on magical green fire. Viv saves the coffee machine and cash box, but that's about it. Her old sword, all the inventory, and the entire building are destroyed. As a result, she spirals into depression. However, she's made so many friends and regulars that everyone comes together to help rebuild the shop, even the Madrigal. Support your local crime boss. It's better than most insurance plans, I guess. Anywho, the shop is better than ever. Thimble has 2 ovens, so he can really crank out those goodies. There's extra room for more customers. And there's a bedroom for Viv and an extra one for Tandri, because they obviously got the hots for each other, but this book is tasteful about it. Viv and Tandri have a little kiss. Amity finally kills Fennis on a neighboring rooftop a few weeks later, and we're all having a happy ending.
Yay! That's so nice and sweet. I feel like this book has just like the cozy and sweet friendship thing happening for it.
Yeah.
Also, if at any point during that summer you heard something going outside, it's because there's some fucking creature out there just making some horrible noises. So I apologize if I couldn't iron that out while I was talking earlier. Just something out there, just ran. I have to shut the window and sweat my ass off now, because God forbid.
It's probably a squirrel. They do this thing where
creatures.
They go.
Yep, that's it.
Yeah,
that's
it's a squirrel. It's a squirrel. It's a squirrel.
Fucking squirrel.
It's a squirrel sounding a squirrel alarm. That's what they do.
Cool.
So,
well, thank you for reading that summary, Paris. A delightful time, and the not so delightful squirrel that's outside my window right now.
That's fine. All right, so let's. Do we want to just get right into the rubric? I don't think we need any.
Heck, yes.
Yeah. All right. Technical construction. All right, Chris, how do we feel about typos, formatting, punctuation, all that stuff?
It's all A-okay. It's perfectly fine, Paris. There's good editing. It's just a normal-ass book. Remember normal books?
Yeah, this is all well done. Like, good pacing, good editing. The writing is straightforward, but still elicits feeling at times. You know, this started as a self-published Amazon book, so it is fucking possible, you absolute hacks! It is possible! All of you out there. I know I'm clipping, I don't care.
Look, we're not, we seem all the time like we're like, oh, self-published, who decides whether, you're not good enough to get published. It might seem like that sometimes, but this book is a really fantastic example of the fact that you can do it on your own. You really can.
Yeah.
It's gonna be fine if you just take some things into consideration.
And guess what? It went well as a self-published work, and then it got picked up by an actual publisher. Hey, look at that. I think, is it Tor that picked it up? Picked up by Macmillan. They're a huge publisher, so that's cool. Yeah. So, hey, it's possible. It can happen. Woohoo.
Easy one.
Oh, fuck
easy
yeah.
one.
It was a nice, easy read. Appreciated that very much. All right, so I guess we're just moving on to...
We can go right in.
Yeah.
Right into plot construction and content layout, or whatever we call in this section.
Yeah, plot construction and, like, general coherence. Okay, general coherence. Take us away to the coherence of this plot.
Perfectly coherent, because honestly, this was a refreshing book overall in a lot of ways, not just because it's about coffee and coffee is refreshing, haha, but I think I enjoyed the relatively low stakes for a fantasy novel. I mean, in your average fantasy book, it's the quest to save the world, or there's the evil Dark Lord, or what have you, and even ones that don't really concentrate on that too much, there's some sort of world-altering force happening in the background, or perhaps the foreground. And this
really
isn't it. No one's trying to tear the earth asunder or enslave everyone, or the big bad evil guy or anything like that. The refreshing twist is how small the scale is here. It's just Viv wants to set up a coffee shop and retire into a nice, quaint life after all the adventure.
Yeah, and I really appreciated that the whole smaller scale retirement angle wasn't just a bouncing off point where it turns into one last job for the protagonist like it always does, That didn't happen.
One last coffee.
Yeah, it was,
I gotta have
exactly.
one last bean.
And also it did not do the thing where authors tried to make fantasy quote unquote modern, and it just feels like cheesy and hard to accept, where they're just like cutting and pasting modern stuff and sort of fantastical stuff, and it just kind of falls flat, Yeah, I think that the fantasy setting works here. Chris, you pointed out that it's a funny idea to think, well, of course no one's heard of coffee or cinnamon rolls because we're in a fantasy realm. And, it's very possible to believe maybe people haven't heard of those things yet in this area of this fantasy world. Cool, It was...
Yeah, that's what made it believable when... there were some corny moments, I think, when they're like, what should we call this drink? A latte,
yeah,
perhaps.
Okay,
it's like,
okay,
well,
but that means the gnomes are French, right? So, canonically.
Because French as a language exists here where the word latte is, right?
But it's gnomish. It's gnomish, so gnomes are French, is what I'm saying. So now I'm just imagining French gnomes, and it's very funny to me. The whole rest of the book, I was just thinking about French gnomes, and I don't know. There's something about that amuses me, and I appreciate the idea that, like, oh, this secret language is, it's just fucking French. Like, it was a funny way the author was able to sort of make all this cohesive, so I appreciate that. French gnomes. Sound off in the comments on French gnomes.
Yeah. And that also made it believable when Thimble, the ratkin baker, was like, I've come up with a new treat, and it's a cinnamon roll, or like, a biscotti or something like that.
Yeah.
So it worked in the favor to make it believable that, like, oh, Viv is having all this success by setting up something that we take for granted every day. And that leaned into the kind of the cozy setting. It made me want to see other stories that are akin to this, not just like setting up a coffee shop at a different I don't need to like sci-fi coffee shop, although honestly I do like the idea of like, it's not a space opera, I guess it's like a space local band show or something, but like where humanity is the only species in existence that has the coffee bean. Like no other planet has the ability to create this or something, so the idea of caffeine is such like a crazy superpower to any alien that comes across it, where they're like, wait, you have like wake up juice, you have things that give you more energy, we're all just tired all the time out here. And it becomes like a sort of resource war. Maybe not that scale, but like everyone just really, like all the aliens really just love the coffee beans or something. I would accept that.
I also think that, even though we're kind of sticking with the classic sort of 70s fantasy D&D sort of, racial structure, we're not falling on the shittier stereotypes, and we're actually keeping in step with things we know about that idea of gnomes, right? Like they're tinkerers, they're good, they're artisans, right? They're also kind of like, they like to be relatively neutral, so I feel like providing a beverage everyone can enjoy is a very gnomish thing. So I liked that they were the ones that made the specialty coffee machine, although I guess that implies that gnomes are also Italian here. Fren-talian. Gnomes are Fren-talian. That's what I've determined.
So are you going based on, like, the cultures that have created, like, the coffee culture, which we have to bring up, are obviously very colonial, because coffee beans themselves come from, like, South America for the most, and Africa, right? Like, that's where most
it's
coffee
very
beans
colonial.
Are
also, latte is Italian, not French. I'm sorry, the gnomes are Italian. I don't know why I was thinking French. The gnomes are Italian. Sound off in the comments, Italian gnomes.
So French gnomes, get the fuck out. Actually, Italian gnomes, you can stay.
I don't know why I thought latte was French. Latte is Italian. Sorry,
it sounds French. You had me. I fully bought it.
They're from the same fucking language family, so sometimes it gets a little muddy. Those European borders aren't very
it's
stable.
All proto-gnomish language, really.
Yeah, I guess it is a little fucked up that, like, in our reality, coffee and tea are both very tinged with colonialism. But here we're not getting into that.
Let's just accept that perhaps the gnomes controlled their own destiny.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Maybe in this world we can enjoy a steeped bean.
That's the fantasy.
Enjoy a steeped bean without baggage. All right, so. Anyway, the gnomes are Italian. Sorry, I'm a fucking idiot. They're Italian, not French. Anyway, in terms of talking about plot and coherence, I gotta say, I am very rarely so surprised by the directions a book takes. This book really subverted my expectations. So, for example, I was expecting, like I already said, I was expecting Viv to be pulled into her old life for one last job, like every fucking adventure story. That didn't happen. Or she
has to, like, defeat the coffee overlord, right?
Like, that didn't happen. I thought the Madrigal and Viv were going to have this, like, primary tension, and it was just going to be, like, a mob boss story. That didn't happen. I also expected her old group would maybe double-cross her, but that doesn't happen either.
It's just one of them.
Yeah, it's just one guy who is just an asshole, and it's not like a group of people who are her friends, went back on her or whatever for reasons. And then lastly, I knew that there was going to be some romance in this, and I really thought, I was like, it's a guy writing about lesbians, like this is going to be pornographic. Absolutely not. I was completely fucking wrong. So Brav fucking O, Travis. Thank you for making something that subverted expectations, that at least went new and different places, and thank you for not making me sit through lesbian porn written by a man. I really appreciate that.
I was waiting for it when Tandri was a succubus, right? Like,
oh,
you were like, oh, it's the sex demon. Oh,
yep.
They're going to do it. But not at all. It's just kind of in the background, and it's a nice little button on the ending. That's really it.
It's
really
well done.
Like the rest of the book.
Yeah, it's really well done. So cheers to you. Speaking of which, we can move into talking about character quality. I don't think we have to talk about like rules following, because I don't think this really...
There's not like a lot of the fantasy, more like, you know, the usual things we have to get into with like fantasy or sci-fi, where it's like they've established like this magic system and like, how well does it work? I guess the most magic thing is like the Squirrel stone, right? And like that whole thing is essentially, you think or the legends imply that it brings you great fortune, but it's fortune is the friends we found along the way, because the Squirrel stone just brings people that are your type of person, I suppose, closer to you.
People who are, I guess, aligned with you, closer to you, which in this book is supposed to be like, well, you know, if you're kind of on the up and up and a generally decent person, then you'll attract other decent people. And if you're a scoundrel, then you'll maybe attract other scoundrels, which means that you will just bring ill upon yourself. So, you know, that part of it, I suppose you're right. Maybe we should talk about that. I'm fine with the whole, like, oh, this growth from this creature has properties that, you know, other creatures don't. Fine, I'll take that. The idea that it attracts like to like, hard to buy, but also it's not a pivotal thing in the story, because I feel like these people would have met each other anyway. You know, it's not like the stone is so... It is the real... I feel like it's sort of just added to be, hey, it's a fantasy book, I guess we have to add a magical thing, and also to make the
and it's
bad
also
guy...
questionable about whether it was really having an effect at all.
Yes, exactly. And they even question that with the chess playing guy, where he's like, I don't know, it doesn't actually do anything, you know, so... Anyway.
I will say that the time power gnome or whatever is going on there is the weirdest part of the whole thing, where you're just dropping in this guy that seems to have mild omniscience into everything.
I kind of like that there's just this dude who's living life not on a linear timeline and is real cool about it. Like, I think that's kind of fun, actually.
He's chill. He's like, I guess I'm at this point in the timeline right now. Where is that again? I don't know. I'm having a coffee, whatever.
Yeah, he's like, whatever. I'm just having chess and drinking a coffee. Anyway, yeah, I guess the only rules following thing would have been the stone, but like you said, you know, the author intentionally adds characters to say, like, but did it even do a thing? Like, this just happened.
Ultimately,
you know?
It's a cozy magical item to match the cozy story.
Yeah, it's fine. I mean, I feel like it didn't need to be in there, but I'm not offended by its presence. Largely because... it's made clear that it possibly wasn't actually doing anything, which I thought that was helpful. All right. Character quality. All right. Do we feel like these characters have depth? Are they cardboard cutouts? What are we working with here?
Thimble is delightful. I love Thimble the baker, who's a rat that whispers quietly and just wants to bake good shit all the time. Highly relatable. He just wants to be out of the way, doing his art, making people smile with how good the art is. Relatable.
Totally. Dude, Thimble is my long lost brother. Like, and I stand by that. He reminded me of a sweeter, quieter version of Rizzo the rat from the Muppets, with whom I already strongly identify. So I was like on board. Also, in my mind now, I feel like Mr. Rat, our longtime YouTube commenter, I think Thimble is just Mr. Rat. Like, that's what I'm...
Yeah, that's my headcanon now. Although,
lore.
I will say, Mr. Rat seems a little bit more chaotic than Thimble does
but
here
maybe they're just related. Maybe it's not the same rat.
Mr. Rat is the intersection of Thimble and the gnome guy in this story.
Yeah, that's a
right.
Good point.
Like Mr. Rat seems to also be living non-linearly in a lot of ways. So,
that's true. We never know.
Just chilling.
We never know where in space or time Mr. Rat is presently. Yeah, I mean, even as you mentioned in our notes, like, even the madrigal was well written, where she's definitely dangerous and 100% running a mob, but also not thoroughly evil and also not a cartoon. It is hard to get all those ratios just right, just like baking. But Baldree did it here. He did it. I mean, even though we're not dealing with super deep characters, we're still getting enough, right?
Yeah, like you said with the madrigal, she's definitely criming up there, and she's sending toughs out to be tough and threaten people. But in the end, she's not evil for evil's sake just to send toughs to beat people up. She's also like, well, you also have a lot of good baked treats that I'm really into, so your cut for me can just be the baked goods, which is, if you're going to be buying them anyway with the profits, perhaps that's just cutting out the middleman in a way. Although, as our patron mentioned up at the top, it is kind of funny that there's this tension between Viv and the mob, and then she's about like, I should just bash everyone's head, but then it ends up being like, oh, I'll just give her some baked treats pretty much every week, and then the madrigal ends up kind of paying to rebuild the shop after. So I guess, help out your local cartel, and maybe it'll help you out in the long run.
But then you're beholden to the cartel ever after. That's the trick. I guess.
Sure.
I guess Viv just got lucky. The madrigal's a cool cartel boss.
Who's into the baked goods. Really, This is all Thimble's doing. She should be thanking Thimble for not getting her ass handed to her.
No, I mean, but I think it's a nice variation, right? We're not getting that classic mob story. I appreciate that. Yeah, and in terms of characters' pasts and stuff, we just get a little bit, we know Viv is a bit tortured, and so is Tandri, but we just get a little sprinkle for seasoning, just a little bit of cinnamon on top, a little bit of cinnamon sugar. Given the length and scope we're getting here, I think these personas were very well characterized. I also really, really, really deeply appreciate that we had two women who were falling in love with each other with another woman, and it wasn't fetishized, it wasn't too much the focus, it wasn't over the top, it wasn't silly, it was just right. Just like we talked about earlier, just lingering in the background, like the smell of a freshly ground and roasted cup of coffee, just a nice light wisp,
And it came from their support for each other and their understanding and communication with each other.
And their
right?
natural
It's not like
rapport.
Tandri's a sexy barista succubus who's got tattoos on, and she smiled at me once, so she's definitely into me.
Yeah, and it was never and to add on to that, I want to point out something missing from this book that we can celebrate. We didn't get any of that gratuitous body stuff, right? The villains weren't evil because they were fat or amputees or differently built or any of that shit. The women were not described by their bust waist hip ratios or glistening food-based descriptors for skin and hair.
Even though there was ample opportunity for that to occur in this book, right? She was as glistening as Thimble's cinnamon rolls.
The icing.
And Viv wanted a taste.
The icing from the cinnamon roll dripped on her delectable breasts. We didn't get any of that shit. It was really, really well done.
How poisoned are our minds, Paris, that we just imagine, we're worried about that happening?
I don't think we're poisoned at all. I think that's the society we live in, Chris, and it is very clear. So, man, Hey, folks, this is how you include romance and make it not suck. This is how you include loving relationships that are built on an actual foundation and not just boobs big, hot butt. Wow, you can have
I will fight and die for you because boob big.
Yes. So Once again, you
don't understand. Boob big. I will martyr myself and cast myself into the dragon's fire.
Face pretty, hair nice. Okay. But like, you fucking fools, it is possible. Please, gods above, follow Travis Baldree's example here. Thank you, Travis. You did it again. Wow.
Can I just say, I was fully ready to go. I've seen this book in my Amazon recommendations. I always kind of looked at it. I was like, that's probably corny as fuck.
Yeah, it looked fucking
like,
bad. I was like, oh, it's going to be like a poorly written lesbian romance, and it's going to all be about, I don't know, her tail going in her orc vagina or whatever. Like, and that didn't happen.
Great. Awesome. Are you sure your brain isn't poison Paris?
Well, by the Society of
But like, again, yeah. I wanted to say that I have seen this before, and I was like, that's probably corny. I'm not in the mood for that or anything. But then our patron gave us the choice to read this, and I went for it, and I was just pleasantly surprised the whole time. It was just nice.
Yeah, it was
just nice.
Very, very refreshing.
Okay, 1.
Oh, yeah, easy one. I'd give it a 2 if I could.
Right. I agree. Anyway, prose and dialogue here. We mentioned this already at the top, but I guess now is the time to kind of like break out some examples when we can. But prose is just completely reasonable, functional, with enough description that focuses on cozy elements like baked treats or coffee sensations, the work of setting up a shop, Viv's internal struggle to not just immediately start busting heads at the first sign of conflict, to make this all feel like a quiet, nice, decent time. This book is akin to having a nice lunch on a Saturday afternoon. I'm not about to run and tell anyone about how nice an afternoon I had, but it's not a moment of existential terror at the state of my life and the world. So I'll take it.
Oh yeah, for sure. Let's read a little bit so folks understand what we're talking about for flavor here. All right, I can go ahead and take this first one. Thimble rapped on the front door as the two of them prepared to open. In his hands, he clutched a cloth-wrapped lump that trailed wisps of steam. Viv smelled something warm and yeasty and sweet, and thought she recognized cinnamon, too. He scuttled indoors. Tandri emerged from the pantry with a bag of beans and a carafe of milk, inhaling deeply. What is that wonderful smell? The ratkin glanced anxiously between them, then slid his wrapped bundle onto the countertop. Viv pointed at it. May I? Thimble nodded hesitantly. Carefully unfolding the cloth, Viv revealed a roll as big as her fist, almost too large to imagine eating. Soft bread wound in a spiral with dark sugar and cinnamon nestled between the rings, and a thick, creamy glaze frosted the top and dripped down the sides. Tandri was right. The scent was unbelievably amazing. You made this? Asked Viv, impressed. Did, whispered the ratkin, again with the little bobbing nod, his hands clasped before his flour-dusted apron. Viv and Tandri shared a glance, and then Viv delicately tore a piece from the enormous roll, sniffed deeply, and popped it into her mouth. She closed her eyes and made an involuntary noise of pleasure. It was easily the most delicious thing she'd had in, well, maybe ever. Oh, good gods, she murmured around the mouthful. Tandri, try it. Tandri peeled off a piece and obliged. As she chewed, Viv could feel some kind of atmospheric shift around Tandri, a sultry radiance, and her tail lashed back and forth in elegant loops. Viv and the ratkin watched her chew, rapt. When the succubus opened her eyes again, her irises were huge, cheeks flushed. She looked dreamily at the ratkin. You're hired. Her voice had gone husky. Then she startled and glanced at Viv. The aura dissipated. Wait, that is why he's here, isn't it? Viv turned to Thimble. How would you like to bake these here every day? He nodded and shifted from foot to foot, as though he wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. 4 silver a week? Viv prompted. She looked at Tandri to make sure that there would be no objection. The succubus nodded, eyes big, and made a yes, yes, get on with it, flapping with her hands. Thimble nodded an affirmative. Then he stretched out his nose and, for the first time, uttered more than one word in his silky whisper. Free coffee. Viv offered a hand. Thimble, you can have all the coffee you want. And then we can do, I have another one highlighted in here. Thune's wakeful noises rose as she moved farther into the city. At the outskirts, the buildings had been mostly wooden, with some riverstone foundations interspersed. The deeper she ventured, the more stone prevailed, as though the city had calcified as it aged. Muddy dirt gave way to a smattering of stone lanes, then cobbles near the city's core. Temples and taverns huddled around squares featuring statues of people who probably used to be important. Any doubts about the witching rod had evaporated. It definitely pulled now, like a living thing. Brief twitches growing into insistent tugs. Her research hadn't been in vain. Ley lines were clearly threaded beneath the city, powerful avenues of thaumic energy. Scholars debated whether they grew where people settled or gathered folk near, like warmth in winter. What mattered to Viv was that they were here. Finding a potent ley line was only the start, of course. The little wishbone of ashwood twitched left and right, tugging one way for a time before reversing and pulling like a fish on a hook in another direction. After a while, she didn't have to look at it. The feel of it was enough, and Viv paid more attention to the buildings she passed. The device ushered her down the major thoroughfares, through the squiggling alleys that stitched them together, past blacksmiths and hostels and markets and inns. There were few people her height on the streets, and she never found herself crowded. Black blood tended to have that effect. She passed through all the layers of smell that made up a city. Baking bread and waking horses and whetstone and hot metal and floral perfume and old shit. The same smells you found in any city, but underneath them, the morning scent of the river. Sometimes, between the buildings, she could see the blades of the water wheel at the flour mill.
Yeah, I think that's a great couple of examples of how the writing is done here and where the author chooses to put his focus, right? Like, this is a thing that I think is so important in any sort of written material, is that in any situation, in any scene, you could point the, I guess, theoretical camera at so many different things. We can point our focus at so many different things. Even in the room I'm sitting in right now, I could talk about all the objects in here, or I could talk about how hot it is in here, or I could talk about, like, the memories that I have in here. And any one of those will offer up a different sense experience to whoever I'm recounting that to. And where you choose to point the focus matters so much for setting the tone and the vibe for things. And where Travis chooses to set the focus is on, scent details, or, Thimble's flour-dusted apron, just to give, pulling your focus to that detail for just a moment to show, like, Thimble's a baker at heart. That's what he's doing all the time. That kind of stuff is so important.
Yeah, I mean, and we're about to move into talking about dialogue, and I feel like that's, a mirrored discussion. I mean, because the dialogue feels pretty natural. Everyone talks in a way that makes sense for their character, right? We don't have any alien dialogue or weird stuff happening.
I agree. I mean, there's a scene that I think I should read, actually, that is where Viv's old adventuring party comes in because Viv is sort of concerned about, like, being menaced by the madrigal, and, like, also kind of disturbed, I think, by her old adventuring mate Fennis. I don't know at this point in the story if that has popped its head up yet. But anyway, she's sort of, like, on edge and paranoid, and she gets the old crew back together to sort of, like, explain the situation and, like, get sort of, like, their take on things here. And the way the dialogue is done here, because there's 4 or 5 people in the same room, and these are people that we don't see a lot of in the book, but they still have a distinct voice in how they speak. You can tell what they're motivated by and what they care about just based on how they talk. So I'll take this one here. They sat on the benches at the big communal table. Tandry brewed coffees, and Viv set out a plate of cinnamon rolls and thimblets. "Thanks for coming," said Viv when they were all seated and served. She toyed with the mug in front of her. "And I guess first things first, this is Tandry. She's my co-worker. Tandry, you know Rune. This is Galena, and Tavis." She gestured to each in turn. "Twice charmed," said Rune around an enormous bite of cinnamon roll. "A succubus, huh?" said Galena, her chin propped on her hand. Viv saw Tandry stiffen. "The little gnome must have as well." "Nah, I don't mean anything by it, sweetie. Long as you don't ask me to invent anything. Pleased to meet you. Love the look." The gnome waved tiny fingers at Tandry's sweater. "Galena tends more to, wet work," said Viv. "I do like knives." Galena produced one from nowhere to trim her nails. Tavis nodded solemnly at Tandry and nibbled at the edge of a thimblet. The stone fae was as taciturn as ever, his watchful face framed in white hair. "Nice to meet you all," said Tandri. She took a quick sip of her drink, and Viv could swear she was nervous. Rune set his matching blinkstone on the table between them as he polished off his roll and reached for a thimblet. "So, seeing the place and tasting these, I'm inclined to think you didn't send for us because you're hoping to sleep rough and crush skulls again." "You got me there," said Viv. "No, I'm not coming back." She stared at Galena thoughtfully. "Before I get into that, though, I owe you an apology. All of you. I'm not proud of the way I left. You deserve better from me. After all those years, I was just afraid." "We know," said Galena. Rune told us. She squinted at Viv. "I was a little pissed, I don't mind saying, but this is nice." She gestured expansively at the shop. "Happy for you, Viv." "I didn't mind," said Tyvis in a quiet voice, because if anyone understood avoiding a difficult conversation, or indeed any conversation, it was the Stone Fae. "Well, now that's out of the way, let's get down to it," said Rune with a big grin. "We're folk of action, eh? Unless you just wanted to feed us, and if that was the case, can't say as I'd complain." He started in on his second roll. Viv took a big breath and sighed it out. "So, things are going well. Really well. Better than I could have hoped. But there's a local element that I need to deal with." Tyvis looked suddenly interested, and Galena stood up on the bench and planted both hands on the table to get a better eyeline. "And you haven't sent him off with broken bones and better manners yet?" "Well, no, not so far." "Then you want us to help with that?" Galena's grin was eager and a little bloodthirsty. "It's not as simple as that." "Oh, this is the simplest," said Galena. "Nothing simpler." Viv flattened her hands in front of her and tried to think of the right words to use. "Here's the thing. I was hoping that the threat of me would be enough. I even hung black blood on the wall as, I don't know, a sort of warning. I don't want to deal with this the way that old Viv would have because... She struggled to articulate it. "Because if she does, it ruins everything," said Tandri, joining the conversation. Rune looked skeptical. "She's taken care of problems just like this a dozen times. 24. Protecting what's yours? There's no shame in that. Don't see how that would ruin anything except the face of whatever fool is trying to shake her down." "Not what I mean," said Tandri with surprising heat. "Sure, it might be fine this time for this one thing, but once it's an option, once she can pick that back up," she pointed at the sword on the wall, "she loses what she won by building this place without it. Maybe next time it's just a job to earn a little silver in a lean winter. Maybe a bounty in exchange for a shipping discount. And little by little, this isn't that coffee shop in Thune where you can get a cinnamon roll as big as your head. It's Viv's territory, and you don't want to cross her. And did you hear about the time she broke the legs of somebody who looked at her funny?" "She has done that," whispered Galena out of the side of her mouth. "That was before." Tandri stabbed the table with a finger. "Right now, in this town, the shop is a clean slate. She should pay the madrigal and let it be." "Well, Viv," said Rune, who looked confused, "if that's what you're thinking, then why are we here?" Viv tossed her hands up helplessly. "I don't know, advice? Or I guess you thought we might do it," finished Galena. She archly inquired, "Were you going to offer to pay us?" Viv looked pained. "No, that's not what I had planned. I don't know what I should do." She made a frustrated growl deep in her throat. "The problem is I don't want to pay them. I don't think I can bring myself to do it, and no, I'm not trying to hire you to take care of the problem, but I thought maybe just a show of force." "That's the sword on the wall again," said Tandri, "and if you go too much further, you might as well use it and be done with it." They all fell silent for a moment. "The madrigal," said Tyvis. "You know him?" asked Viv. "I know of them," he replied. "Then what do you think?" Tyvis was characteristically thoughtful and quiet, but they all waited without saying a word. "It may be," he eventually said, "that this can be resolved without blood." "I'm all ears," said Viv. "It's possible I may be able to arrange a parley," he continued. "Meeting in a dark alley to talk terms seems like a sure way to get a knife in the back," observed Galena. "The madrigal and Viv have more in common than you might think," said Tyvis. "Why do you say that?" "I've met them before," he said. "I'm bound by certain oaths not to reveal overmuch, and I take these oaths seriously, but I have a sense that it would be worth the effort." "And you could set this up?" asked Viv. "I believe I could. I'll reach out to a contact in the city. We should know by nightfall tomorrow." Galena looked unconvinced. "I still think murdering them in their beds would be safer." "I assure you it would not," said Tyvis dryly. "And you really think the risk of this is better than just paying what they're asking?" Tandri crossed her arms, her expression severe. Viv thought about that for a moment. "I don't think it's better," she sighed, "but I feel like I've cut all the tethers to the old Viv but one, and I can't bring myself to cut that last rope. I'm just not ready yet." Tandri's mouth tightened, but she said nothing further. There was a long and uncomfortable silence. It was broken suddenly when Rune shot up from the bench. "What in the hell is that?" he exclaimed. The dire cat had appeared and circled behind them. She rubbed along the bench, purring like an earthquake. That's Amity, said Viv with a relieved grin. She glanced over at Townsbury, grateful that the tension was broken, or at least deferred. Why do you need us when you've got a damned hell beast on staff? Rune cried. Aw, you're just a sweetie, aren't you? Cooed Galena, scratching Amity's back vigorously with both hands. She could have easily ridden the dire cat. She's a fair weather watch cat, Viv chuckled. Shows up when she feels like it. She's hungry, too, observed Galena, offering the enormous creature a roll. Amity swallowed it whole. After that, the conversation moved on to other less delicate matters, and Viv brought out more drinks while Rune polished off the remaining baked goods.
Thank you, Chris.
So a lengthy scene there, but I think, clearly Rune's just there because a friend asked him to show up and there's food around. Galena's excited to maybe do a stab, and Tyvis is just quietly sitting in the corner and only speaking up when he feels like he's useful. And Tyvis is a character that we see like in this scene and almost never again, and yet I get him. So I think that's just a really good indicator of the quality of dialogue that we see here.
Yeah, and I think that passage was a good one to read because we also see that this isn't a fantasy book, or even I guess it's actually common in any kind of book where the main character has a violent past and they still use violence, but it's justified. In this book, Viv is like, no, I don't want to justify it anymore. Like, I'm done. I'm really trying to change and have a different life, right? And, and it's never really, it's not like, I mean, you can infer that she's trying to have a, quote unquote, morally better life, but the book doesn't actually say that outright. It's like, no, someone just wants to have a different life and they don't want to rely on, the violence that they've used in the past. And I don't know, I just, for such sort of a silly book, it's like kind of, I won't say profound, but it's more than we get from most sort of, I guess pop books, or however you want to put it. And I appreciated that.
Okay, well, those were lengthy examples there. And are you ready to score this? Because another 1 for me, honestly.
I think so, too. Yeah, I mean, I guess because the scene we read mentioned it, I don't always like when there's like a convenient connection, but it didn't seem outlandish that Tyvis could have known the magical, because it's not like they were from a place that was so far away. So it was fine. Anyway, a happy 1 from me for that. Okay.
That means we can move into Terriblo's presence. And honestly, our skittering lord is off for the week. Leave a message and they'll get back to you when they return. There's no Terriblo's presence here at all.
Yeah, they're gone this week again. Don't know what they're up to, but I don't know. Hope they're having a nice time this week. I don't know. They're probably on vacation again. They've had a lot of vacations.
It's tired this year, I guess. Hope they're enjoying 500 cups of coffee simultaneously in each hand. Or whatever.
Each tentacle, yeah. All right, great. That's easy.
That's a 1 again.
That's a 1 because there was no batshit absurdity. Again, because there's nothing in this section, I guess we should explain. Usually Terriblo's presence is when things are off kilter. Maybe we feel like we're not in reality or things aren't making any sense. Lots of plot holes. We don't have any of that this time, so we're free. We're free of the tentacles.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So that means we can wrap it up with Should This Exist, Harris? So we have some questions that we like to ask to kind of like get things rolling in this category. And the first one is, would readers of this genre enjoy this? And I mean, because it's fantasy, quote unquote, I think that's a tougher question to answer than you might expect for something like this. If you're looking for high stakes sword and sorcery kind of stuff, then no, you wouldn't like this. But if you want like a cozy read with a fantasy twist or something a little bit different in the fantasy genre, then sure.
I actually kind of disagree. I feel like there's there's definitely a strain of fantasy reader who would not like this because they want that hero's journey, they want that classic structure. But I think a lot of people would be fine with this. I think most people who are into fantasy are fucking nerds like us, and I feel like they would appreciate sort of the parts of this that are a bit new. So yeah, I think yes.
Okay. Do we feel as if the author's goal was met? And I'd say yes. Not much other to say here than, like, dude can write a coz. Like, he's got the idea down, I feel like. And he just wanted something cute and sweet. Just, you know, like a cinnamon roll. This is a cinnamon roll of a book.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd say he met his goal. Great.
Does it add anything new, interesting, or novel? And I guess, like, the low stakes that we talked about before, that's sort of the interesting twist. So that's...
Well, and I think, like I said, the author definitely subverted some of my expectations. You know, you're not getting a lot of the shit you'd think you'd get. So you're really rolling on out of here, free of the baggage that a lot of books, let's say with this cover and this idea, might have.
Sure.
So
fair.
Yeah. I mean, I think, you know, it also didn't feel, I said this earlier, but it didn't really feel like that weird cut and paste of like, oh, we're mixing fantasy and cozy, and then it's just like mashed together. It really felt like a genuine melding. Like he really slowly stirred that curd without cooking the eggs, you know?
That's a good one, Paris. That's really good. All right. Well, did it take something from us? And I'm doing great. I'm doing fine over here, Paris. You want some coffee?
Oh, yeah. Dude. Yeah, like, it didn't take anything from me, but like I said, it did. Like, dude, when you were reading that passage with a fucking cinnamon roll, I was like, fuck, I still want a cinnamon roll. Like, I'm still craving it. I finished this book like a week ago, and all I've been thinking about is like, where do I get a really good cinnamon roll? And then I thought maybe I'll make some cinnamon rolls. Then I was like, nah, that's too much fucking work. I don't want to yeast a dough and wait for it to rise. And
yeah,
God.
we're no thimble.
So anyway,
over here.
I'm still lusting after cinnamon rolls. It's left me with a lust for cinnamon rolls. And also, I kept wanting to drink more coffee while I was reading it, but I had already hit my caffeine limit for the day, which I have to watch for health reasons. And I was like, fuck. I just like, so I guess it blue-balled me for caffeine and cinnamon rolls. So that's
sure.
The only bad thing that happened.
Right. All right. Well, that means we can move on into Can We Fix It? And Paris.
Well, we should say this. I think this actually.
Oh, right, we have to score. I'm sorry.
You know,
we
and
have to
again,
score.
Should this exist? Yeah, I think it's fine for this to exist. I don't, you know, I think it actually should. Not only is it fine, I think it should exist.
Yes.
I think it's an interesting take on some stuff. Hey, look at that. Hooray.
Yes, and now we can actually give the final score before we move into Can We Fix It? And it was a 1 for technical construction. It was a 1 for general plot and coherence. It was a 1 for dialogue and prose. It was a 1 for Terrible's presence. It was a 1 for Should This Exist. Perfect 5 points.
Yes! Travis!
Nice
you've
job,
done it.
dude. Nice job.
Yeah, seriously, thank you very much.
Moving into Can We Fix It? I feel like a checked out customs agent or whatever here, man. I'm just like glancing at this book's identification and asking simple questions about like, oh, what are you doing? Oh, you're writing a little story about a coffee in a cafe and friends we met along the way. All right, go on through, sir. Have a nice day. Enjoy your stay.
Yeah, I feel like it's very clear to the, I don't know, book TSA that there's no crimes, no writing crimes being committed of any kind. You know, y'all enjoy your trip now. Yeah, it's not something I'd go for or recommend because, like, unless I knew someone was looking for, I'd have to know the person,
yes,
you know, to recommend it. But damn, this book knows what it's doing for its intended audience, and it's not painful for people outside of that audience, right? And I think it even does something a bit new and nimbly avoids the tactless shit puddles many an author will unquestioningly swim in. So good on you, Travis, and thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, Travis, for writing a refreshing book for us here at Terrible Book Club. Thank you, Austin, for recommending this book to us.
Austin, thank you so much, because I think the last time you recommended something, it was literally dripping in cum. So I was real glad to be just dripping in icing.
Holy shit.
This time.
Good God.
What was that book called that he asked us to read last?
Interspecies Reviewers.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So,
Did Austin buy this because he saw that there was a succubus and he was like, yeah, time to get sexy? And then it turns out he was like, oh, it's actually just kind of nice and cozy.
I mean, maybe, which is funny. Because honestly, I made the same assumption. I saw the cover and was like, this is either going to be really silly.
The hentai guy recommended this, goddammit.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. Thank you, Austin. We really appreciate the recommendation. Thank you for saving us from porn for a year.
Yeah, next year it's going to be interspecies, intercoffee fuckers or whatever.
Interpastry reviewers 55. Coffee's gone wild. Woo!
Donut Fuckers Incorporated or whatever. Dunkin Orcnuts, but it's actually really just Orcnuts.
I'm crying. I can't. Oh, when they say 2 creams, 2 sugars. You don't even know what they're getting into. I don't know.
All right. Thank you, Austin, sincerely. And thank you to our other patrons and Ko-fi donors. Thank you to our bad bookworms, Anna, Ben, Donnie, Emily, Jakub, Jared, Scott, and Will. Our exacting editors, Carol, Kieran, David, D, Emmy, Funny Robot with Antennas, Greg, Harry 7, Martin, Root Beer Cutie, and the Ugly One. Our loathsome librarians, Veronica, Senior, Arant, Beast with the Least, Yanka, Luchek of the Void, the taco-eating unicorn of the Hot Springs. He's taking a bath now.
Wow.
Patricia, Robin, and Austin again. Thank you. Our pesky publisher, Miles May. And our Ko-fi donors, our ever-faithful Kiwi Thing, along with Matthew, Martin, and Brenna, who helped relieve us of terrible books. If you want some terrible books we've read for the show that we have physical copies of, you can buy them over on our Ko-fi page. Will anyone accept the challenge to become an arch-archivist this year? What heinous, monstrous tome will you force us to read? Or maybe something nice. Maybe you can force us to read a nice big book? A nice big, natural book.
That you stole it. How about a pair of nice big natural books for us this year, please? Oh, all
right, Paris.
Gosh, all right.
I'm off to enjoy
I
a
hope
nice.
Everyone. Sorry, a nice pair of big naturals.
Okay. I mean, okay. You're the one that said it. I feel like you're allowed to say it.
I was sorry. I was actually going to tell everyone that, hopefully everyone's in on the joke, but we are making gross jokes like this because we've had to consume so much horrifying content for this show, and we actually hate that. Yeah. But we just make fun of our own pain, and this is how we do it. This is how we cope. So, anyway, I hope I. Don't miss the I don't know, Dunkin Orcnuts special this week
coming
or
soon.
whatever.
All right, Paris, I'm off to enjoy a nice coffee and pastry, or it's actually like quite late in the evening, so not really, but just for the illusion of the show ending here. Tomorrow morning, I'm actually planning a very nice breakfast outing. So that's
really?
what I'm gonna do. Yeah, we don't even have plans. I'm just like, it's a Saturday morning. I'm gonna sleep in. I'm actually mid-move with my partner, so we're gonna go out, have a nice coffee, perhaps a treat, go thrifting for some furniture, and just enjoy.
Really want a cinnamon roll? Wait, where can I get a cinnamon roll?
Just a nice Saturday afternoon. That's what's happening tomorrow.
I have a very different kind of weekend ahead of me, but I am searching for cinnamon rolls near me because why does Dunkin' Donuts come up as the closest? That's bullshit.
We're leaving. End the podcast. Roll. Get out of here. Not Dunkin'.
They don't have a fucking cinnamon roll. That's a lie. Dunkin' Donuts doesn't. Wait, do they have a cinnamon roll? Am I wrong about this?
I think sometimes they have cinnamon roll adjacent things.
I mean, I don't think that sounds very good. What about the donut? What about Union Square Donut?
Oh, they definitely do that. They have you can buy them, I think, and bake them at home.
I mean, sometimes Veggie Galaxy has them, but not. You have to get there at stupid o'clock on the weekend.
Or their rat baker just only does so many before he's off for the day.
Yeah, man. Hey, you got to give that little rat a break,
All right. Bye, everybody. Go enjoy.
Union Square Donut cinnamon roll.
Go enjoy a nice cinnamon roll. We're out of here. Goodbye.
See ya.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Terrible Book Club. Terrible Book Club is an independent podcast produced by your hosts, Paris and Chris. Sound design and audio editing by Chris, with sound effects and music by Epidemic Sound and sometimes also Chris. Our theme song is Kiss by Yearn, which is, you guessed it, actually also Chris. You can find more of his soothing synthy sounds on Bandcamp at yearn.bandcamp.com. Do you want us to review a book of your choice on the show? Do you want access to some extra audio-visual weirdness? If so, become a patron at patreon.com/terriblebookclub. If you'd like to send us a one-time tip instead, you can do that at ko-fi.com/terriblebookclub. You can also support TBC for free by sharing the show on social media, following our accounts on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, or Goodreads, telling your friends about your favorite episode, or by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts, Podchaser, or anywhere else on the internet. To send us book recommendations or your adorable pet photos, send an email to terriblebookclub@gmail.com.
I'm sorry, I was crying so hard while you were trying to read patrons. I couldn't help it. It was so funny. This book was a bit of a thing on BookTok from our BookTok. I can't bok choy. BookTok.
You said the same thing 3 times in a row there, Paris. I don't understand what the problem was.
I guess in my ear I'm hearing BookTok, not BookTok.
What do you... That's the same thing.
Okay, I'm just going to take that again.
What are you talking about? What are you book talking about?
Oh, God.